Welcome to another episode of Jael Unfiltered. And today we are going to talk about guns. Please do not forget to subscribe and to like.
So you've asked me to come and help maybe women understand the process of owning a firearm for the first time, and this is a topic that's to me is near and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about this stuff. It's not that I'm passionate necessarily about guns. I'm passionate about the concept or the empowerment that you give somebody like a woman to be able to defend herself. And so I think
And you're very passionate about
I am.
teaching about the subject.
And it's not, I don't get political. That's politics is stupidity. I don't deal with stupidity. I deal with objective reality. And the objective reality is that trouble, right, can come at any time, anywhere. But most people, most men, husbands, boyfriends, they start off with trying to get their wives a gun. Yeah, they usually try to get the smallest, least powerful, but that's a really bad place to start. And so, if I was to break this down, I would say we first start talking about the mindset, because it all starts there, right? It all starts with a decision and a certain mindset that you need to have.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want you to know that this is going to be the first of many series about this subject, because it's a very long...
vast.
Yes.
It's a very vast subject.
And I want you to be well informed when it comes to this.
So I think today we'll talk about the mindset. Then we'll have probably a second session, maybe about the process of selecting a firearm. And specifically, when it comes to women have different challenges than men. And so I can speak to that. And then maybe we can actually do a third part where we talk about some of the fundamentals, some of the basics. We can use something like this just to kind of demonstrate. It's a plastic fake molded gun.
A dummy.
Gun. And maybe we can end with a live session at the range. I don't know. But tell you what, let's start about the mindset.
Sure.
Let me ask you a question, okay? Because you've been carrying a gun for as long as we've been together.
Yes.
Right? And so, why do you carry a gun?
I do carry for protection.
And what are you protecting yourself from?
Something that it's out of my control, any threats.
Okay. Are you afraid? Is that why you carry a gun? Because you're afraid?
No, I do not carry because I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask the question is because that right there is a very good starting point. A lot of women decide to carry a gun because something bad happened to them.
Yes.
And now they're afraid. And so they're carrying a gun out of fear. And that's a bad starting place. Because fear, especially decisions that are made because of fear, lead to actions that are ultimately going to be bad outcomes. Okay, so I'm glad you said that. I carry a gun every day, and I don't fear anything.
Correct. You cannot be.
I don't live in fear.
Exactly.
So I don't live in fear. Okay, so that's great. It's a good starting point. When it comes to the proper mindset, there's things that we should look at. One, a lot of people will say that a firearm is a last resort. You hear that a lot.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've been teaching to use guns for a couple decades now, more than a couple decades. And I can tell you that I don't agree with that statement.
Why?
Because there's certain situations where the firearm is the result. It's the first result. It's the only result. And it could be a little extreme, right? But for example, we just heard.
Look what just happened.
Just happened not long ago, a couple of days ago. Just happened at Joel Osteen's church, right? Mm-hmm. Where a woman came in and started firing. There is no last resort there. The only way somebody was able to stop her from killing people was to grab a firearm and make the decision to end the threat. So there is no last resort there. That is the resort. There is the only resort. So it's a cliche, and I get it. We're not, we're civilized people. We're not looking for a fight. So that brings me to the next point, right? When you decide that you're going to carry a gun, one of the things that you need to understand is, yes, there's great responsibility with carrying a firearm, okay? Yes, it's really meant for those life-threatening situations that could occur anywhere. But I prefer to think of this as a hierarchy, right? Number one, if I'm out in public and I'm buried in my phone, I already have the wrong mindset. Some people call it task fixation, where they're fixated on a task. Cell phones are like the number one task people do, right? Typically, if I'm in public and there's more than one of us that's armed, right? I don't mind browsing through my phone because there's a couple of us looking, right? And there are a couple of us look, and even then I'm aware, like I bring my eyes up and I look, but people don't do that. People, they bury themselves in their phone. They have no idea what's happening around them. In fact, you can walk past them, they'll never know, right? And so that's the first thing, is this lack of awareness. Well, that's part of the mindset. Part of the mindset of making this decision is, hey, I need to also improve on my, people call it situational awareness. Just
be aware of your surroundings.
Don't complicate it. Just be around your surroundings. You need to know who and what is in your immediate vicinity, okay? Also, be aware of where the exits are. So when you come to a place, just think about where the exits are, stuff like that. So that's number one, is you gotta be aware, and people nowadays, they just aren't. So what good is it that you just go out and buy a gun? Exactly. If somebody has the drop on you because you weren't aware. What if somebody pulls a gun on you? You can't pull your gun out. You're already lost. You can't draw on somebody who's pointing a gun at you.
Definitely, yeah.
You're at that point, you're just going to submit and hopefully wait for an opportunity to have an opportunity to draw your weapon, but you're done, right? And how did that happen? Because you weren't aware. So it starts with awareness. And there's different things you can do to build awareness. Maybe we can have a podcast just on that, honestly.
Yes.
It's a very vast topic.
Broad subject.
All right, then we have to think about avoidance. With awareness comes the opportunity to see things unfold and avoid them, right? Just because you're armed doesn't mean that you now put yourself in a situation where you may be forced to have to do something or defend yourself. You can actually use, with the proper mindset, use the fact that you are aware of your surroundings to avoid things. You can see things unfolding and decide to completely elude them altogether, or maybe you're in a situation where, you can't completely avoid the situation, but because you were aware and you saw it unfold, you're now in your mind quickly coming up with a tactical plan to respond or to have to react to it. Whatever the case may be, awareness, right, leads to avoidance. Yes. All right. If you have those two things covered, right, and you have those two things covered, then the third piece of this mindset is you have to be willing. And this may sound politically incorrect, but you have to be willing to take a life in order to defend your life or the life of another. That's a decision that has to be made before you buy the gun. It's part of the mindset. In other words, you don't want to draw your weapon just to have leverage and win an argument.
You can.
That's not how that works. But people do that, by the way. They're weak-minded people. They're in an argument. They're in altercation. They don't know how to de-escalate. They don't know how to walk away. Too much ego, whatever the case may be. They end up pulling a gun, to win the argument? That's not how this works, right? And so when does this gun come into play? Here's when the gun comes into play. Either you are in fear of imminent, like immediate death, or at least great bodily harm. By the way, the other person doesn't have to be armed with a firearm. They could just be a much larger person. Imagine, right? You're going to Starbucks by yourself, and some dude who's 6'7", weighs 300 pounds comes at you ready to hit you. That's the amount of bodily harm that he can cause on you is pretty significant. Mm-hmm. And so that's why that's the criteria, is you're trying to avoid either imminent death or great bodily harm. Now granted, whatever that is, you're going to have to articulate that after the fact. But that's a whole other podcast, okay? But it's part of the mindset. I feel that a lot of people who go out and buy a gun have not thought this through. They don't have the proper mindset. They don't know why they're buying a gun. Some of them are buying because they're afraid, so it's out of fear. Mm-hmm. They're terrible at their awareness skills. They have no idea what's around them at any time. There's a Starbucks that you and I go to. There's a person who serves us at the Starbucks who we love very much, right? But they're clueless. Like, we could stand there and they won't even notice that we're staying there. And that is, I laugh at that, and at the same time, it's aggravating, right?
It's bad.
It is bad. And so, and then finally, listen, at the end of the day, it's like Spider-Man said, right? With a great power comes great responsibility. This is not a toy, right? I don't treat them as toys. I don't think anybody should. They are tools, though. I don't consider them weapons. I know there's a lot of stuff on the internet that just doesn't make sense to me. Can it be used as a weapon? Yeah, but it's really a tool. Ultimately, the real weapon is you. Mm-hmm. Because what good is this if I don't know how to use it?
Yeah, it's like when people say guns kill people.
No, guns don't kill people. It's people with guns.
Yeah, exactly.
Or people with knives, or people with bats, or people with hammers kill people. And so that's my point. My point is, when you really think about it, the weapon is really you. Yeah. This is just a tool that you chose. Now, whether it's this or whether it's a blade, which I also carry, I carry a blade, whether it's a fixed blade or whether it's a folding blade, whatever the case is, these are all tools that can be used, right, to help, in a situation where your life may be in danger or whatnot. But ultimately, the weapon is you. Well, you're only as good as your training. Mm-hmm. You're only as good as a training. Any training that you do with a firearm has to include the mindset component, right? It has to include this thought process. It has to include the understanding or defining of a mission. So, for example, and I don't, like people use the term mission. We're civilians. We don't go on missions. That's not the application, right?
Correct.
Our son, who's a Marine, he goes on missions. That's not what we do. When I say mission, is there has to be a purpose or a reason, right? That has to be very well defined and articulated for why you made a decision to carry a gun. If you're able to articulate that, and people need to really think about what that is, because it's going to be different for every person, right?
Correct.
But if you're able to articulate that then is your starting point for everything else, every other decision you're going to make. What type of gun? How am I going to carry? What am I willing to do? What am I willing to not do? It's kind of like your foundation. I have my statement written out. It's my belief statement. It's why I carry. I carry because I want to be able to protect those that I'm willing to die for. And that's a very profound statement. That's my statement, right? That's my reason, my purpose for carrying. By the way, the fact that it's people who I'm willing to die for, it's a very short list.
I hope so.
That means that I'm more than likely am not going to inject myself in a situation that maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say that because
Right.
I'm not willing to lose you for.
Well, there you go. So that's my point. My point is, I'm not about to inject myself in a situation that maybe the gun is the solution, but I'm not willing to die for those people. Mm-hmm. I'm not, and so my use of the firearm is going to be very, very limited. It's going to be very specific, and for very specific people, mostly my immediate family, right? I do have a soft spot in my heart for children. I think children are worth dying for. But other than that, it's not something I'm willing to do, right? Mm-hmm. If a guy comes in to rob the bank, I'm not getting involved in that. Let him rob the bank. It's not something I'm willing to do. But if somebody comes into my house to hurt my family, that's a different story. Somebody tries to carjack you out of your car, they're probably going to die and not even know that they just died, right? I mean, it's going to happen that fast. Those decisions have already been made in my mind. That is part of the mindset. And so that's why I bring it up. All this is part of the mindset. So if anything, one thing that you can walk away with this first episode is, listen, it's a big decision. It's an important decision. It's a decision that shouldn't be taken lightly. Husbands and boyfriends, they're well-intended. Sometimes they just go out and buy the gun and then bring it home to their wives, and they have no idea that that's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can do.
I remember when I was first exposed to guns, and it was when I met you, and after we got married, I remember that I was carrying this Smith & Wesson, I believe it was, and it was a disaster because at that time I didn't take any classes, nothing, but I was not afraid of carrying a gun.
Correct.
I was not afraid of use it in case that I had to use it. And also I remember, and I am grateful that day that you took me to the gun store, mm-hmm. and you said, okay, choose your gun. I was not expecting that. And that's when I got my first Glock, which I'm a Glock lover. You were not expecting me to get a Glock 17.
No.
And that was the first one that I grabbed. But I was never afraid of touching a gun or talking about guns, or, the way that we do. And I want women to feel comfortable talking about this.
Sure.
Comfortable about being able to carry one of these tools, right? In my case, you used to work. I used to stay home with the kids. To me, at that point, my responsibility, I felt responsible of my boys, protecting my children and myself, of course. And it was one of the main reasons why I started carrying.
And by the way, one of the things we can talk about in another episode is having guns at home with children.
Exactly.
Because that's another one. So anyway, I think that's for episode 1. I think that's the message is, before you go out and buy a gun, these are just the things from a mindset perspective, right? I call it mindset. I think that's the first thing. You have to kind of reconcile all these things we just covered today, especially that one part about, are you willing to take a life, right? I mean, you're committing yourself to having to kill somebody if you have to so that you can live and so that your family can live. By the way, that's not a difficult decision for me. It's not. That's an easy decision for me because I prioritize what I'm willing to do. Some other decisions may be harder. That one's easy, right? And so anyway, that's our first episode on the very controversial. I don't know why it's controversial.
I don't understand why.
But yes, the very controversial, very touchy subject of guns. It shouldn't be, but unfortunately, politics always plays into this. Hopefully, by the time you're done with this series, it won't be as touchy and controversial. So
you're gonna love it, actually.
Anyway, see you at the next one.